So in this module, we're going to talk about customizing Rider and also extending it using plugins. But in this video, we're just going to focus on UI tweaks. So if we open up the settings, Control Alt and S, and obviously we've been here quite a few times before. So the key map, I'm not going to talk about this because we've already spoken about key mappings quite a lot. And we also covered this earlier on in the module. If we go to Appearance and Behavior, Appearance, we've got this concept of themes and color schemes. In this particular video, I'm going to skip this because we will cover this more in depth in a later video in this module. So let's skip that bit. But on this same appearance page, we've got various other options. Accessibility, so we can control zoom levels, contrast, screen readers. You can adjust the colors for people that have trouble differentiating between different colors. Looking down at the UI options, we can have a more compact mode. We'll talk about project colors in a bit in this video. And there's various other options. So in this video, I'm not going to go through every single option because obviously we'll be here all day. I'm going to pick out a few key ones and then go through those. But I would recommend that in general, you just go through all of these settings and just browse through, spend a bit of time looking through to get an idea of what's there. So moving down, we've got this background image. You can choose a different image. So if I just do that and save, then let me open up a file. So you can actually have a background image if you want. I personally would find that quite distracting while coding, but it's there as an option. To get rid of that, we can just clear. So tool windows. So we've mentioned these quite a lot. So we can optionally say to show them. So that gets rid of them altogether. We can say show the names. So then that shows if you'd rather see the names, so you can quickly remember what they are, you can do that. Or if you prefer more of a clean view, then we can uncheck that, which is the default. Another area in the settings for tweaking the UI is in the editor. So you've got the editor general appearance, and then we've got a list of editor kind of options. So a few things that I tend to do is I like to show line numbers, which I can toggle here, and you can choose how that gets viewed, whether it's absolute, relative, or hybrid. I'm not sure what hybrid means. Let me try that actually. So relative, we can see that's relative to where the cursor is. Let's try hybrid. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, so that's relative to where the cursor is, but the current line seems to show the actual line number, but everything else is relative. Let's go back to absolute because that's what I prefer. And obviously you can hide the line numbers altogether. And I think that's the default. I can't remember. Another one is show white spaces. So if I just drag this down a bit, I personally prefer to see the white space, and you can see these dots here to indicate spaces. I use spaces for indentation. If I use tabs, it would be kind of like a symbol that looks something like that. Obviously a lot smaller and grayed out. I believe the default for this is to not show white space, but I actually quite like it, so I enable that. I quite often find that when I'm looking at the code, that lots of people seem to end up with white space on the end of lines, or especially on a line which is empty, and the person developing has pressed enter here, and the cursor's gone here, but then they've left a load of white space here. And one setting that I quite like to set, if you go to general, so edit the general, right near the bottom, you can choose this option, remove trailing white space. So on save, remove trailing spaces on all lines or modified lines. So I like to just have that. So when I save, it just cleans up all those erroneous white space characters. Another one I quite like is in appearance. We've got the show indent guides. And what that is this code is a bad example. If I switch over to, let's do this one. There we go. So we can see these vertical lines going down. They're very faint, but I find that quite useful for if I'm lining up, say this while block, I can follow the line down. And I just find that easier to line up different indentation blocks. Again, I believe that's off by default. Some other options worth mentioning. So if we go back to general, and it's not in general, in sticky lines. So I think this is fairly new-ish. And I think this is turned on by default, but I turn it off because I'm not that keen on it. But if you like it, if I save this, we can see that as I scroll, if you look up at the top, the class name and the method name and the loop you're in, you can see like this block as I'm scrolling, that kind of sticks, so that I can see the context that I'm currently in. I personally don't like this, so if you right click here, you can disable it for the language or altogether. So if I do that and then that goes back to normal again. Another customization is breadcrumbs. So down here we can see we've got some breadcrumbs, and this is breadcrumbs into the file I'm currently in. So we can see like the namespace, class, and the method. And these are clickable, so you can choose whether to show that and on what language, and you can choose whether it's placed at the top or bottom. And as I mentioned before, we can't go through everything, but it's worth just clicking through some of these different options to see what we've got. So things like the editor tabs, you can choose whether, so like these, you can choose whether they appear on the top left. That's interesting. Let's see what that looks like. Oh yeah, so that's actually transposed it, so it's, I quite like that actually, but anyway, let's go back to, it does take up a lot of space, I guess, if I move that to the top, so you can configure that anyway. Even like small details like whether it shows the file extension there. So you can really see how customizable this is. Let's go back to here. So it looks like I didn't turn off that setting when I showed that you could have this open all the time. You can get to it by right-clicking here and going show main menu in separate toolbar. So that's how it was before. When you right-click on this, you've also got lots of other options. So you can customize this bar up here by saying add to main toolbar, and you can add extra stuff. So say you're a mouse user and you'd rather click to go to the commit and you want it just there, or things like showing the history. So there's a few options here. You can actually customize the toolbar to give you even more options. You've also got, if we right click again, you can change the project color. So that was the thing I mentioned in the settings earlier, where, so I can say this project is a different color. You can see it says Cobalt is the current one. If I go to Amber, we can see that that gradient changed and this changed. I personally, whilst I tend to have lots of projects open at the same time, don't really use this. Maybe I should. But if I just change this back to the Cobalt again, so it's back to normal, that option is there if you do have lots of projects open and you want to have some kind of visual indication of the different projects. The last thing I want to show in this video is the different viewing modes. So at the moment, there's lots of things going on. So I've got this Solution Explorer. I obviously can collapse it here. We've got the toolbar along the top. We've got a status bar and all this down the bottom. So whilst obviously we've just seen that you can customize it quite heavily, I might actually just want it to be like this most of the time, but then sometimes switch to a more focused mode. And there's a few different modes to do that. There's something called full screen mode. And if I do Shift, or I can do Control Shift and A, which goes straight to the actions list, which is a more filtered list. I generally just do Shift and search in all anyway, but I can do Shift and do full screen mode. And it tells you the shortcut is Alt, Shift and Enter. But by doing this, now within my recording window, because of aspect ratios, it doesn't cover the bottom bit of my screen. Then you won't be able to see, but basically right at the bottom, it's extended rider right to the bottom of my screen. So it's covering my Windows taskbar and it's literally just taking the full screen. So right to the top, right to the bottom, which you can't see at the moment, but it's extended it right down. So on this monitor, I can't see anything else except for rider. If I Shift and it's remembered my last command, and you can see it now says exit. So I can do Enter to exit that. So that's now gone back to normal. Another one is distraction free mode. So if I do Shift and type that, now I don't have a shortcut assigned, so I'll just use Shift and Enter for here. And this is kind of like a focus mode where it's got rid of all the side windows and sidebars and menus except for what we see at the top here. At the bottom, you'll be able to see this being the bottom of the screen. It's not extended further down, so I can still see my taskbar and everything below it. It's not filled my entire monitor. So if I do Shift and exit that, there's something else called Zen mode, which is a combination of both. So if I type Shift and type Zen mode, then that's Control, Alt, Shift and Enter. If I toggle that, that's combined both. So that's the top of my monitor. You can't see below, but it's extended this code window right down to the bottom of my screen, to the bottom of my monitor. So literally this code window we're seeing here is filling my entire monitor. There's nothing else for distractions. So that's Zen mode. So Control, Shift, Alt and Enter. So obviously, as I say, I can't show you everything, all the different settings, but I've cherry picked a few key ones there to show you. As I mentioned earlier, I would definitely recommend just going through the settings and just scanning through to get an idea of what there is there. In the next video, we're going to look at plugins.